So today's lesson will be a sitting lesson, and it is good to have a mat nearby so that at times during the lesson you can sit back, lie down, and fully rest your body from the forces of gravity that work differently on you when you're sitting upright versus lying down. But for now, find a comfortable chair that's firm and has a backrest, preferably not armrests unless they don't get in your way of movement. And just sit back comfortably in the chair. Use the backrest if that's comfortable for you. And begin by feeling and sensing and noticing. Notice your sits bones deep within your buttocks. And what part of your sits bones does the weight go through? Can you feel a little weight pressing through the back side of your sits bones? Through the front side, the outsides or the insides? Just imagine in your own mind what you think the shape of that sits bone might be like. And notice you put a little more weight. Is your weight leaning over onto the right or the left sits bone a little more than the other one? Most people, and you hear me say this again and again, are slightly asymmetrical. So it's very normal to discover these subtle or significant differences. So notice your own differences. And notice that it's those differences that gives your mind something to be interested in. If you were perfectly balanced and symmetrical, there would be nothing of interest for your mind to inquire about. Feel also as you lean back into the back of your chair how you receive support for your back, for your spine. What does it feel like sitting there for your shoulders, your neck, and your head? Again, does your back tend to lean a little more through the right side of your back or the left side? Feel the support under each of your thighs, your right thigh and your left thigh, resting on the seat of your chair. Is there more pressure through one thigh, more support? Does one thigh feel heavier or lighter? Softer or more toned? And travel with your attention down your knees. Notice the distance your knees are apart. If you were to draw a line down your center, from the center of your nose, your lips, through the center of your sternum and down between your legs, when one leg be a little closer to this line than the other leg, or a little farther away. And notice, is there a natural tendency, an urge to want to make them the same? Does making them the same distance or the same symmetry or the same weight somehow make it more right? And see if you can resist that urge and just appreciate the differences and bring your attention down to both of your feet. How are your feet touching the floor? Does your whole foot touch the floor? Or does the length of your legs compared to the chair allow for only part of your foot to touch the floor? Have a sense of the sensation in the balls of your feet, the right side and the left side. Do your toes rest all the way down to the floor, or are they lifted a little ways away from the floor? Your heels. Do you tend to put more weight through the outsides of your feet or the insides? And again, is it the same on the right side and the left side? More weight through the balls of your feet or your heels? More weight or less weight through the right foot or the left foot? And then sitting like this a couple times, just gently press your feet down into the floor and release. And feel what happens as you gently press your feet and release them again. How does that affect your thighs, your pelvis, your back? Is there any connection being made between how you subtly begin to initiate pressure through your feet and how that pressure connects in some subtle form of movement or tone or tension up through the rest of your body? And also notice when you apply and release that pressure, do you tend to have a dominant foot? Does one foot press a little bit before the other foot? Does one foot lag a little bit behind? Does one foot press more firmly, make more contact? And then let that go. And slide to the end of your chairs so you're not using your backrest, if able. And bring your attention once again to the sits bones. And see if you can have an image that your sits bones are shaped like the base of a rocking chair. And let yourself begin to rock forward and back on your sits bones. And just feel, where do you rock from? What rocks you forward and back? Do you do something with your shoulders, your head or your neck? Or does the movement come just from your pelvis? Maybe your hips a little bit? And as you rock forward and back, what else moves? Do your legs move at all? Do your knees come a little apart and together? Does the pressure change at all under your feet? Maybe you use the pressure to help rock forward and back. And notice that for most of you, when you rock backwards on your sits bones, you're more likely to go into a nice, relaxed slump or slouch. Just relaxing in that way, softening your whole spine. And when you roll forward on your sits bones, you're more likely to sit up tall, feeling the forward curve of your lower back. Your head comes a little more balanced over your shoulders. And notice as you rock your forward pelvis and back, rock your pelvis forward and backwards. Does your whole trunk, your shoulders, do they also rock forward and back? So see if you can rock in this way, where when you're rolling on your sits bones, your shoulders and head go backwards as you roll backwards. Your whole trunk goes backwards, and as you roll forwards, your whole trunk rolls forwards. And for some of you, this is the most normal and natural way to experience rolling on your sits bones. And you actually don't have to slouch a whole lot at all. Your whole trunk can stay fairly upright. And you can roll on your sits bones just by moving your shoulders and head forward and back over your pelvis. Again, feeling what else is happening in your legs and your feet. Notice, are you concentrating so hard that you're holding your breath or tensing your mouth in any way? And see if you can go even slower, more gentler. And then just pause in the middle. And if it's comfortable, rest your hands on your thighs. And this time, keeping your head and your shoulders relatively in the same position. You don't need to effort to lock them there, but basically keep them the same. See if you can roll just your pelvis so that your sits bones roll forward and backward. And basically when your sits bones roll backwards, your lower back rolls backwards and your whole spine tends to want to go in the direction of a slouch. And when you roll your sits bone forward, you bring the natural curve back into your lower back, and your shoulders, your chest, your head are lifted back on top of your spine. And see if you can just let your whole trunk sink into this feeling of shortening and slouching, curving, so that when you're rolled back as far as you can be on your pelvis, I like to think of the whole trunk from the tip of the head to the base of the coccyx, the little teeny bone at the end of your sacrum and spine, shaped like a crescent moon. And then when you roll forward and you get all the curves back in your spine, the forward curve of your low back, the slightly backward curve of your middle and upper back, and then the forward curve again of your neck, it's more like an S. The spine is not straight, but slinky and slithery like a snake. Again, feeling what happens in your feet, in your legs. As you roll down and roll back, what happens in your shoulder blades? Can you feel them glide forward on your ribs as you roll your pelvis backwards? So your shoulders sort of slouch forward, and then your shoulder blades glide backwards on your ribs as you sit up tall again. And can you feel your head just coming to a nice place of rest on top of your shoulders, where all the muscles of your upper back and neck don't have to work to hold your head on, but it's just balancing on top of the spine like a golf ball on a tee. And then pause for a moment and sit back in your chairs and rest. And just take a full rest. Noticing when you rest, what do you think about? Noticing, is sitting creating any sense of fatigue? And what would be the best thing for you at this moment if you're feeling fatigue? Would it be to lie down and rest? Is just giving your back some support with a chair the kindest thing you can do for your learning? Notice, where does your mind wander? Has it been a busy day already? Is your mind thinking of the things you need to remember to do when the lesson is over? Or that person that cut out in front of you and made you late to class? Or are you just here, enjoying the opportunity to expand your sensation repertoire, learning to feel better and better in your bodies? And then again, slide forward to the end of your chairs. And have a sense as you sit there, how long could you sit tall like this? And what would get tired first? What would start working and asking for the back of the chair or the support of the floor? Just feel that in your body. And what if you had the capacity to little by little adjust any of the individual 24 vertebrae to create a little more comfort here and then a little more comfort there? And you had more variety, more choices throughout the day in how you sit and stand, just by knowing how to sense, how to feel, and how to move the different vertebrae in your spine. So knowing now, like you do, that there are 24 individual vertebrae, 5 great big strong supportive vertebrae in your lower back, your lumbar spine, 12 vertebrae throughout your middle and upper back that are also connected to the 12 ribs on either side, most of which connect to the sternum, providing support and movement around the heart and the lungs, sometimes known as the rib cage, which I prefer not to call it that, since it is not an immobile, solid cage. It is a moving, living, truly breathing system as it responds to your inhalations and exhalations. And then 7 vertebrae for your neck, allowing your head to be supported at the top of those 24 vertebrae. And then see if you can begin to get a sense, going back to the rolling down and the sitting up, of the 24 vertebrae. And for some of you, you might feel like you have 4 vertebrae. As you roll down, your lower back goes backwards, and then the lower middle back, and then the upper middle back, and then the neck. And just see if very gently you could begin to differentiate more and more possibilities of sensing more of those 24 vertebrae. And it's very valuable, especially in the beginning, to just imagine. Just imagine. If you got caught up in having to feel it right, you might not ever get there. But if you bridge the feeling with the imagination of the feeling, eventually the actualization of the feeling will present itself. Eventually, and there's no hurry. And then bring yourself to sitting up tall. And we're going to roll down, but starting with the rolling down, rolling back of the sits bones, and imagining as if from the bottom to the top, you're rolling out from your support 1 vertebrae at a time. So you'll roll your pelvis back, your sits bones roll back, and you'll feel as if you could feel the lowest vertebrae beginning to slide backward, and then the next lowest, and then the next, until you feel the whole curve out of your lower spine, and then you start to feel the backward curve happening in your thoracic spine and those lower vertebrae, and the ribs begin to follow, and then you feel it happening as if you could feel it in each of the vertebrae of the middle spine. And every once in a while you notice if you're still breathing, you soften your jaw, and you just keep going down as if you were slouching, vertebrae by vertebrae, each lower vertebrae taking out the support for the next vertebrae up, until eventually you're left with your shoulders hanging and your head hanging forward. No support, like a rag doll. And what's most interesting now is the next part of this movement, which is how do you put yourself back together again? And you put yourself back together from the base up. Nobody builds a building with the antenna on the top of the building before there's a building there. They start with the foundation, and your pelvis is that foundation. So let your shoulders and head and ribs stay completely relaxed, and find those sits bones, find your pelvis, and begin to roll it forward until you feel as if that first and second lowest vertebrae begin to come forward and find their place in the foundation. And then each vertebrae finds its home on top of the next, building these building blocks that are both structurally sound and flexible and able to move from this very supportive foundation, until eventually the middle vertebrae come into place, the upper vertebrae come into place, allowing the shoulders to just softly land over your trunk. And eventually your head is resting on top of the entire spine with its forward and backward curves. And you're not working to hold a military posture. You're just finding an effortless posture with very little external muscle use required, because we're developing the intrinsic muscles, the very tiny, truly core muscles that had the capacity to move individual vertebrae. And just continue to do this a few times, slowly going down, developing your potential to feel and imagine the different possibilities of different vertebrae, losing their support and relaxing into a slouch. And next time you roll your pelvis forward when you're ready for that, notice that not only does your pelvis roll forward, but it also presses down. So it's not just the rolling forward that begins to lift and place each of the vertebrae, but there's this gentle downward pressure from your sits bones, from your pelvis, and each vertebrae gets lifted into place. And some of you, from injuries or from habits learned long ago, are particularly conscientious about using your muscles of your upper back and neck to keep your arms and head from falling off. So just notice as you tune into the support of your skeleton, the support of your spine, notice that tendency to want to use the muscles, to want to adjust your shoulders, to lift your head, and see if you can just breathe into that habitual tendency and really feel that yes, indeed, your skeleton is there, allowing full support, where full stability and mobility is possible at any moment. And after one more time or so, just give yourself a full break lying on your back whenever you feel ready for that. And keep in mind with these lessons, with all lessons, you can take a break at any time. You don't have to wait for me to say break. If you're dealing with discomfort or pain, if the only thing you ever learn is how to take care of yourself, how to listen so that you are doing movements for your benefit and not for mine, you will have learned a great deal. So just resting, feel how you give your weight to the floor. Is it a relief? Is it just a new way to feel the curves in your spine? Do you think, I wish I would have done this sooner? And then the question is, why didn't you? What holds us back from taking care of ourselves? Could it be that years and years ago, when we first started discovering movement in life, that the most common word we heard was no? Could it be that when our kind and loving parents sent us to school, when your parents sent you to school, the teachers, in order to manage all of you, told you to sit down and sit still and be quiet, and your natural impulses were curbed, were inhibited, were restrained. And what does it take now to feel those natural impulses again and give ourselves permission to move in ways that are pleasing to us, to be in this world in a way that fully expresses you and all those dreams and visions that you had as a child, that you left behind in order to please your parents and your teachers? So lying here, feel how your spine is shaped on the floor. For some of you, you may want your knees bent up so there's no stress or strain on your low back. And having your knees bent up will change somewhat the position of the low back. So can you feel it curving forward away from the floor? Or does it curve downward towards the floor? You can play with that a little bit just by rocking your pelvis gently forward and back, allowing the movement of your pelvis to help you sense the curves in your low back. Feel how there's usually more pressure through the vertebrae and the muscles along your middle spine than in your lower back. And then again, feel how your neck curves away from the floor, the natural curves of the spine. And then roll to your sides, and please come back to sitting in your chairs. And just come to the edge of your chair for a moment and feel how you're sitting now. Feel how you sense your sits bones, your lower back, your middle back, your neck. How your shoulders and ribs are supported and can just hang off the central core strength and support of the spine through the pelvis. And then a few more times begin rolling down and rolling up, feeling your shoulders and your head dropping down. And notice where your eyes go. Do your eyes follow? Do they look down and do they look up? And see if next time you roll down and you drop your head and shoulders, you can look upward with your eyes. And when you sit up tall, look downward with your eyes, even though your head and shoulders are coming up to rest on your spine. And notice if you still breathe. And what else can you do with your eyes? As you go down and you take your eyes up, can you take them to the right and to the left and to the right and to the left? And as you come up and you take your eyes down, can you take them to the right and to the left and to the right and to the left? Maybe you can, maybe you can't. And notice if this is difficult for you. What's the tendency? Is the tendency to think there's something wrong with me, I can't do this? Or is there a tendency to think there's something wrong with the teacher, she's crazy? But it's interesting when you notice that tendency to justify or either blame yourself or blame the other versus just being with the experience of a challenge. And then pause in the middle. And next time you go down with your pelvis and your spine, take your head up. And if you're feeling particularly agile, as you take your head up, you can take your eyes down. And as you roll your pelvis forward, you can take your head down and your eyes up. Or just do one. It's a little like walking and chewing gum if you haven't practiced head and eye differentiation much. It's a wonderful way to break up the pattern of always moving things in the same way. And then just let your head and your eyes go with your spine. Can you feel any movement in your hips and your legs? If your legs were going to roll in or out, which direction would they go as your pelvis rolls back and forward? Which direction are they more likely? You're more likely to open in your hips. Which direction are your knees more likely to come together? And try it a few times, rolling back, bringing your knees slightly together, not really making it a big movement, but just gently letting them come towards each other, rolling your pelvis forward, bringing yourself back to your full height, and allowing your knees to open. And breathe and soften your mouth. And what if you took your legs the other way? So as you roll downward, curving your back, you let your knees open. And as you roll forward, bring your knees together. Really bring them together. See what that's like. How does that change your breath, your movement, your ability to roll your pelvis forward and backward? For some of you, it might not change much at all, and for others of you, you may really begin to have a sense of the connection of movement in your hip joints to the direction your pelvis moves. And then just let that go once or twice. Just let everything move in harmony together. And pause when you're done and sit back to rest on your backrest. Feeling yourself resting here with your backrest. Nothing to do but feel. Nothing to do but be. Sometimes I find this the most challenging of all my human endeavors, just being. I'm a particularly well-trained human doing. I'm sure none of you are. And once again, slide forward on your chairs. And this time, as you roll backward on your pelvis, let your body turn a little bit to the right. And as you roll forward, let your body turn a little bit to the left as you sit tall. So going down and turning to the right, rolling, always letting the movement start with your pelvis. Notice if you've started initiating the movement someplace other than your pelvis. Rolling down and turning to the right. And notice when you turn to the right on the downward, you might shift your weight more over your left hip, and some of you might shift your weight more over your right hip. And rolling up and turning to the left. And what if you were to do that the other way? Rolling down and turning to the left, rolling up and turning to the right. And just feel the pelvis is still rocking forward and backward, but it's also doing a little side-to-side movement. And what if you took your head in the opposite direction? So you roll down and you turn to the left, but you turn your head to the right. You roll up, you turn your shoulders to the right, but your head to the left. How creative can we be? And still breathe. And keep our jaws soft. All right, let that go for a minute. Just sit at the edge of your chair. One more fun experiment. Well, maybe one. Never trust a physical therapist who says one more. All right, So rolling back, initiating with your pelvis, roll back to the right, and then when you're back, shift to the left. Roll up over your left hip, and when you're tall on the left hip, shift over to the right hip. Roll back on the right hip, shift to the left hip. Roll up over the left hip, shift to the right hip. Does anybody feel a circle coming on? So what else can make a circle? Your pelvis is now rolling in a circle, potentially. What's happening in your shoulders, your head, your knees, your feet, and reverse directions. So you'll roll backward on your left hip, shift to the right, roll forward on the right hip, shift to the left, backward, left. Just feel that circle. And is it all coming from your pelvis, or have you started using your shoulders more? Can your shoulders be the followers instead of the leaders? Can your head be a follower? Can your head soften and just roll? And can you breathe? And rest? And sit back in your chair for a moment. And feel what sitting back in your chair is like now. Through the right and left sits bones and buttocks, the support, the weight, the sense of the spine lifting up out of the pelvis. How your right and left sides of your back rest on your backrest. The backs of your thighs resting on your chairs. The angle of your knees. The distance of your knees from midline. The weight of your feet on the floor. Come to the edge of your chair to sitting again. And again, just sit there like we did early on, just sitting. How long could you sit here? Is there anything easier about sitting? Is there a better sense of where your balance and your support comes from? If you began to feel any discomfort anywhere in your back, your shoulders, or your neck, do you have more options on how to move and how to gently shift your support to find more comfort? Can you use your breath in any way through the center of your gravity? And when you're ready, come up to standing and walk around and just feel the influence of getting to know your 24 vertebrae on standing and walking. Thank you.